Have you ever read or witnessed something and it didn't register with your mind what had happened? It's right in front of you, and you simply did not believe or did not realize the significance of the event. Today, we will see something in the book of John that we may have missed when we read it before. Hi, I'm Pastor John Sonkrent from Heights Christian Church, and what we are doing as a congregation is going through the Bible in 5 years. We invite you to join us wherever you are by subscribing to this YouTube channel. 6 days a week, we will read a small portion of Scripture and pull just one thing out of it to help us be more like Jesus. And then on Sunday, our service will be online on this very channel, and our sermon will be over the material we read during the week. So today, we will read John chapter 6, verses 1 through 24, and we will see some miracles that are recorded as being done by Jesus Christ during his ministry here on earth. With all of these miracles that we will read about, let's see if you can catch the one that I will be discussing today. So let's begin. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw signs he had performed by healing the sick. When Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up, he saw a great crowd, coming toward him, and he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. And Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each to have one bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" And Jesus said, "Have the people sit down. There are plenty of grass in that place." And they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed it to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to the disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is a prophet who has come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew to a mountainside by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake realized that only one boat had been there, and that Jesus had not entered it with his disciples, but they had gone away alone. Then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread the day after the Lord had given thanks. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. So, were you able to figure out what I'm talking about? Were you able to see it? There were the miracles of Christ feeding 5,000 men, and Jesus walking on the water to catch up with the disciples after he had withdrawn to be on the mountain by himself. But there was another miracle that we may often overlook when we read this passage. So let's look at verses 19 through 21 to see the miracle. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. Did you catch it that time? And immediately they were on the other shore. You see, they were only 3 to 4 miles across the approximately 8-mile wide Sea of Galilee when Jesus joined them. When he stepped into the boat, they were immediately on the shore where they were heading. The Greek word etheios was used here in the original language, and it denotes that no time had passed between Jesus stepping into the boat and the boat reaching the other shore. Many times when I have read this, I have overlooked this one word and didn't give it much thought. Often we will see in scriptures when Jesus healed someone, it was an immediate healing. I think Paul describes what immediately will look like when he talks about the calling up of believers into glory at the sound of the trumpet, which is often referred to as the rapture by the Christians. So let's look at it in 1 Corinthians 15, verses 51 and 52. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. You see, this immediately that Paul is describing is as quick as a twinkling of an eye. I use the example of a bubble bursting. As fast as a bubble will burst, immediately is faster than that. So if Christ comes and we who are believers are immediately changed, and you are not a believer at that time, you will miss it if you blink. The sense of urgency in today's world is that we must, as believers, tell others of Christ immediately, if possible. I want you to pray for the opportunity to tell someone about Jesus Christ, and then also pray for the courage and the boldness to do so, because time is getting short. And I hope you got something out of today's devotional, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.